everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're looking at the G.I. Joe Hammer. The Hammer was first released in the United States back in 1990, and unfortunately, it was discontinued in 1991. The tripod for the Hammer folds up and stores inside the vehicle when it is not in use. As a side note here from yojo.com, other notes are the tires for the Hammer are shared with the Mud Buster and Ice Snake, and are interchangeable among all three vehicles. Additionally, the seat clips for the Hammer are green instead of the more common black. This is a high tech attack Jeep with dual missile launchers. And of course, as we look at this today, it is the U.S. Army, Marine Corps. I don't know if the Navy uses it. Humvee. So, looking at it in those regards, all the wonderful pictures we always get from yojo.com. Looking at our front view here, we have our rear view, and it does have a spare ammo can in the back, as well as a plate for one trooper on either side. Although with the missiles back there, I don't know how well that's going to be for sitting back there, or even having the ammo can back there. Being honest, and to me, this is the replacement for the old Vamp. And one of the comments I had made early on is, I think if they were to ever do a Vamp redo, you would have the missiles as well as the machine guns. And here we more or less have that. We can shoot the missiles off to the side or straight forward, as well as having the machine guns on here as well. And it is interesting because I'm just going to flat out say this. We obviously see this, the top gun on the turret here really is a M60. It's a belt fed M60. It's the old pig, everybody's favorite, kind of man portable machine gun. And they call it a pulse cannon. So just keep keeping it to what they're calling it. And for that reason, it's some of the same things I've kind of called it as well. But this is very reminiscent of the earliest versions of the Humvee, especially with the huge whip antenna that's kind of going over. By the time I had gotten into the Army, we had a couple Humvees. I was mechanized infantry, so I think we did have two Humvees in my uh, company. One was for resupply, one was for the first sergeant, and then later on, our first sergeant really fought and finagled there, and he was able to pull off getting an old 113 for his for personal track, so that way they could do their huddles and all that with all the officers, and come up with operational plans and all that stuff. They had an area they could do that without having to worry about setting up tents or anything. So it's always interesting having these. Whenever we can get more real world vehicles in to a GI Joe, it's always wonderful. And then when I got into the Army, to see how many vehicles that I thought were just fictitious really are real world, it's always fun and exciting, because I mean you get to kind of play GI Joe, and kind of geek out the fact of, hey, this is something I saw in a cartoon, and I always thought it was just kind of a fantasy land thing, and here's the reality of it. So it is always interesting in those regards. Um, Unfortunately, we have easily broken and or lost pieces. The tripod is easily lost. The missiles, the missile mounts, the antenna, the steering wheel, and the entire side gun assemblies are prone to be lost. This is also featured in the DIC uh, cartoon, as well as trading cards, comic books, and of course, we have a commercial as well. So, looking at how interestingly DIC had done it for the spot, which I do remember watching the DIC, the series two, which is what DIC was considered. Um, I don't remember. I guess it's just one of those things. I only watched it once in comparison to the original Series 1 Real American Hero, where I've watched that over and over and over. It's kind of unfair because I have the DIC, but I don't sit here and watch it over and over again. Um, just how things worked out. All right, for Yojo.com, there are no variations of the hammer that they know to exist. We do have the 1990 hammer. We have 2002 a brawler, and then in 2008 we have the SWAT RTV. Let's see. Brazil and France have a slightly different uh, version of this. In France, the hammer was released as simply the Jeep, but included a spring-loaded missile launcher. In Brazil, Australia released the hammer as the Feroz. Feroz. I don't know exactly how you would pronounce that correctly. Uh, I don't speak Spanish at all, so um, it's probably going to be completely mucked up there. All right, and the original retail price in the United States was about just shy of $13, $12.99. But still, that was quite a bit of money. And I remember, okay, so I was starting to drive around this time frame, and um, in '94 when I was in the army, I remember getting gas for about $1. So think of or less than $1. So I sound old. I just want to keep that in perspective. When we think about everything, you know, groceries and cost of toys and everything else. I remember going on leave one time and price of gas had gotten over $1 a gallon and complaining. So looking back and saying it was $12.99, it doesn't seem like it was a lot of money, but for the time, it really was. So, all right, let's go look at our stats. All right, so as we look at the hammer here, this is speed or scale. Now, the nice thing is because this is a actual vehicle, I can come up with the actual length. So the actual Hummer is listed at being 15 feet, so it's 4.57 meters. Now, this is where things get tricky. I do have a crew of one, gunners of three, and we have about room for six passengers. Now, bear with me here. We have three passengers inside. Now, I know that we have spots on either side that we can have people just sitting there, just hanging on, and we also have room in the back. So, actually, I think, counting this all back up here, I'm supposed to have seven. I miscounted here. Um, Going for what the actual cargo capacity of a Hummer is, we can carry about 1 ton. So it's got a 1 ton cargo capacity. So I put about 2,000 pounds on here. We do have a full coverage. Of course, this is going to be ground altitude. Um, Kind of borrowing from the old Vamp. I left the maneuverability at a 2D and the speed at 95 miles an hour. Now, the Humvee is actually listed at topping out roughly about 70. But being a GI Joe vehicle, I figured, uh, they're doing experimental things with theirs, so it might go a little faster than what it would normally be able to do. So I figured let's leave it at a little faster speed. I kept the body strength at a 3D. Now, please bear with me on this one. I do laugh whenever I watch the action movies and bullets are hitting it and they're flying off and all that. There may be some Kevlar onto the shell of a Humvee, but for the most part, it is a kind of fiberglass shell. Okay, it's not bulletproof steel and everything else. Uh, it's a fiberglass. Like I said, there may be some Kevlar in there, but a lot of it is meant to keep the weight down so that way it can still meet the same parameters of what the old Willys Jeep was supposed to do. Supposed to carry or move about a ton, have a certain weight, and so on and so forth. Uh, Unloaded, we're looking at about 2.5 tons It's about 5,000 pounds or whatever. So it's about 2.5 tons for this, which is still heavier than the old Willys Jeep. But trying to keep that weight down, you have to give and take somewhere, and that's what happens. So I left the body strength at a 3D. Now we have the two triple missile launchers. So we have a fire control of 2D, damage is 7D, and this is at speed or scale. Now, we have the high impact pulse cannon, which is what's listed actually on our schematic. Um, so that's our top turret. I put a fire control of 2D on there and a damage of 60. Now, this is going to be at speed or scale. Now, we also have two twin barrel side guns, and then I have guns in here twice. I goofed up on that one. Um, so I left these at personnel scale. 2D for fire control and 6D for damage. Really looking at it as, you have one bigger gun plus the missiles. These would be there to help take out extra troops and all that. I felt that that was really kind of a fitting balance there. I didn't put in any extra equipment or whatever else, which obviously it looks like it does have a winch on the front bumper. Um, it's got a gas can and so on and so forth. A lot of the military vehicles we see with GI Joe have winches or tow straps or whatever. Um, Although I don't really remember, I could be wrong. I don't remember too many winches on the front bumper of the Humvees I saw in post when I was in some 30 years ago. So uh, keep in mind, my mind gets a little foggy on some of that stuff. We kind of romanticize some of that after time. We like to remember the good times, but not so much of the bad times that we ran into. Which I will admit, for the most part, I enjoyed my time. I don't have a lot of bad memories. I know there were frustrating days. I do remember some of those, but you know, I'm gonna say I had a decent time, just as an average, grunt on mechanized grunt. It wasn't any harder or whatever for me than I think anybody else, but it's just what it is. If any of the stats that I present, as always, if they don't work for you, change them and make them yours. This is a good starting point. I think I get everything pretty well. As a role playing game sense, you know, we have to figure out how we want to keep things or change things or whatever else. Um, and if you need to tweak it a little bit because you think something should be a little changed, by all means, go for it. I like to present the things we have, hopefully in a fair and balanced way, and we'll see how it goes. We need to actually get some of this stuff going and play it so we can see if there's things that are a little off. Saying, yeah, I think this should actually be changed a little bit because every time I look at the stats, I will look at it in a different light today than I did 2 weeks ago or whatever and say maybe that should be changed a little bit. So really when you actually play with this stuff and see it in action, you get a sense of no, this is overpowered here and underpowered there and so on and so forth. So we do need to get this going. At some point I will figure out where I should probably put this. I'd love to be able to take the stuff I've got for GI Joe as well as um, the stuff that I have for the Star Trek and the stuff I'm starting off with on Macross, and then later on we will get into probably um, BattleTech. That stuff's already online, so I don't feel the need to copy that. The stuff I've got so far, for the most part, on Star Trek is on D6 Holocron. I know today's not the day for that, but when it comes to the GI Joe, this is all stuff that I've come up with myself. This isn't stuff that I found somewhere else. So for that, I would love to get it posted up at some point. I don't know exactly where to put it up yet. I don't spend I think there's a Google place that I could put it up, so maybe I can post it up there for anyone that's ever interested. Because maybe you want to try and do G.I. Joe in the old West End Games D6 role playing game sense. So, with that, thanks for stopping by. Thanks for visiting. It's always wonderful having you here. I hope you're doing well. We will see you in the next video.